Well, thank you guys for coming out today, and Sid, thank you for hosting us. Sid Rice here, Shorty Welsh on your left. I'm Bob Dowling, and we're doing this for the Treasure Island Historical Society.
Well, first of all, we don't have a shortage of catching fish, and we got Shorty, Captain Shorty here, who I met 35 years ago, actually 40 some odd years ago. And our family came down here, and my dad came down in the Tampa, St. Pete area in the mid-40s and liked the fish and decided to settle in Johns Pass. And I believe Shorty was here a little earlier than that. Is that right, Captain?
Yeah, that's right.
Well, what year did you get here?
About 36.
1936. So, my dad was coming down here and settled at Johns Pass and founded the Johns Pass Fish Company, which became Johns Pass Seafood Company. In fact, he's the one that penned the name Fish Famous Johns Pass.
And his name was?
Charlie Rice.
There we go.
And my dad, when did you meet my dad, Shorty? About what year?
Just after he got here.
Just after he got here, because he liked to fish.
Yes, he did.
Probably took you fishing.
I more than likely did. I had an open launch boat at the time, and Bill Stevens had a bait house there on the dock.
That's right. At the east end of Charlie's dock was
Yeah.
Bill's bait house.
That's right, I
Remember that? And it was a unique little place, very quaint. We had the El Capitan and the Kingfisher running out of there, the head boats. Is that right?
Yes, it did.
You were probably catching bait back then because you were just a young guy.
I was sneaking out fishing when I could.
Well, that's what we all did. Us growing up, us kids, there were 6 kids in our family, and I have an older brother named C.C. Rice Jr. and myself, and we'd work hard to come down to Johns Pass so we could go fishing. And we'd fish underneath the dock. We'd catch crabs and stone crabs. We'd fish off the bridge, catch sharks on the outgoing tide on a balloon. And we even catch jewfish at the base of the bridge underneath the old bridge, the bridge tender's office. And, we just, a lot of history here at Johns Pass.
Yeah, we used, the kids, we used to dive off the pier, the bridge there, and then let the tide take us out. Then we'd get up on the sandbar and walk back and do it all over again.
You wasn't worried about the sharks?
No.
No. No.
We caught some.
One of our people that fished, did that with us was Admiral Yost.
Oh, okay, Larry Yost's brother.
Yeah,
He wasn't an admiral at the time, but
became one.
he became one, and he was one of the kids, and boy, we'd have more fun.
You jump off the old bridge, go out with a tide, and hook up with a sandbar and walk back.
And walk back.
Man, I wouldn't do that today.
There's another old timer we probably could get here is Captain Orland Oakley, otherwise known as Captain Snatch.
Oh, gosh, yes.
He's currently running the Towboat US, parks out here by Eleanor Island. Give him a call. We'll have him come out here and talk, because he ran the El Capitan and the Kingfisher party boats for Mrs. Burroughs, R.D. Burroughs and Merle Burroughs. You remember her?
Yeah.
Them, don't you? Well, I got to tell you a story, how Shorty was running my boat, the Seafood Platter, right here, 42 Hatteras, and charter boat. And he came in one day in the middle of August. I said, Shorty, he had a charter. I said, what are you doing? Well, we got some fish. I said, you got kingfish there. I said, where'd you get those kingfish? Yeah, and I says, well, out there, we catch them all summer. We've been catching them all the time. I said, Shorty, you never told me that. And prior to that, 20 years prior to that, when I was just a kid, we used to go out and catch hundreds and thousands of pounds of kingfish on the half-day boat floating sideways, everybody on one side of the boat. And you have a story where you caught how many pounds of kingfish right here at the J.P. buoy?
1,000.
1,000 pounds at the J.P. buoy. So I said, well, Shorty, if they're that, they must be thick out there if you're catching kingfish. Why don't we do a kingfish tournament? So 23 years ago, we got everybody together. We got Shorty, Charlie Clymer, we got, well, I can't think of everybody, Ralph Heath and Ralph Marcotte. We had all the charter boat captains, and Gene Turner, the Kingfish Pappy Rabbit. Got them all together. We started the Suncoast Kingfish Classic, the first annual. And I was a little concerned that, maybe we wouldn't be able to catch many fish, so we did it over 5 days. Remember that, Shorty?
Yeah.
I believe you had a charter on the Seafood Platter.
Yeah.
Bunch of Chinamen or something, right?
I did.
And he come in there with a gaggle of kingfish, and we loaded the dock. And by the 3rd day, if you didn't have a kingfish over 35 pounds, you didn't get on the board. And I think we weighed in 15,000 pounds of kingfish. And that started our Suncoast Kingfish Classic. And now, in the state of Florida and throughout the southeast and northeast United States along the coast, there's Southern Kingfish Association, huge tournaments. And we founded we're the largest, most longest running kingfish tournament on the west coast of Florida right here at Johns Pass.
Wow. Excellent.
The other thing is, Shorty, you were not just a kingfisherman. Did you know how to catch a grouper or two?
Oh, I caught my share.
Caught your share. He also learned how to blue marlin fish, and because believe it or not, off this coast here, about 75 to 125 miles, we have blue marlin, wahoo, dolphin, and tuna and sailfish. They're just a little far to get to, and my first blue marlin on the west coast of Florida, I caught with Shorty, weighed it in the old salt fishing tournament. It was a 200-pounder. You remember that?
Yep.
That's right. They must have been thick out there too since we hooked one.
No, just know how to do it.
But we go back a long time and started the Kingfish restaurant, went through several generations. I'd park cars, my brother would park cars, we'd be frying fish, learned how to cook in the kitchen, and many generations, and a lot of history here at Johns Pass, a lot of big fish being caught. A lot of people don't realize that Johns Pass is the most heavily traveled inlet on the west coast of Florida. And we're so glad that we grew up in Treasure Island. I used to call it Pleasure Island on Treasure Island, but with Shorty being around and stuff, I hate to ask you your age, but what are you, about 16 now?
Yes, I started back at 16, yes.
But when I came down, my dad, down here, he owned the fish company and had the restaurant. We just begged Daddy, Dad, can we come down to Johns Pass? And he said, all right, you can come down on the weekend, but you got to work first. So I'd go in there and he'd line us up to peel shrimp for the restaurant for the weekend.
At the Kingfish.
At the Kingfish restaurant, which we started in '48. And I had to peel 50 pounds, peeled to vein, tail on, before noon. If I could do that, then I could go on the El Capitan or the Kingfisher on a half-day boat. So that was a great deal.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you know how kids are. I snuck around and I didn't peel my 50 pounds. He found out about it and he wouldn't let me go on the boat. Well, it broke my heart. I couldn't go fishing that
You mean
day.
you dropped a few down the hole?
Well, whatever. I just never peeled the 50 pounds. I didn't know he was checking on me. So make a long story short, from that point on, I made sure that I peeled those 50 pounds of shrimp so I could go on that half-day boat. So my best memories were going on a half-day boat with Snatch Oakleaf, and Mike Amos was the mate.
Yeah.
And we'd go out there and we'd get in the daily pot, $5 to get in. And if you caught a big fish, I won the pot one time, won $60. I was so thrilled. And I'd been on the El Capitan when the Kingfish were running. And they'd get all on one side of the boat and they'd drift with the tide, and 40 anglers would be on one side and everybody would be catching kingfish. And, they were thick. Back then, the kingfish were everywhere. And so, then I'd come and work and park cars in the parking lot, work in the fish house. We delivered fish in the Tri-County area. And a lot of people don't realize that bluefin tuna were caught right out here in the Gulf of Mexico. We brought them in here, processed them, and shipped them up north. And people didn't realize, they thought all the bluefin were up there in Newfoundland. Well, they're right here in the Gulf of Mexico because they spawn out here. I remember I had to peel, we had a gentleman by the name of Clayton. You remember Clayton?
Oh, yes, I do.
Yeah, Clayton was a Negro, and he worked for my dad for 28 years. He taught me how to fillet fish, how to scale snapper. He even taught Timmy Nachman, who's well-known Nachman's native seafood right now, how to fillet fish. And I got 10 cents a pound. Then my dad raised me to 25 cents a pound. I was really thrilled over that. But those snapper were like 15 to 30, 35 pounds, only paying 60 cents a pound. Grouper was 19 cents a pound. That was back in the old days. I'm 61 now, and so I was like 12, 9, 11, 13 years old, parking cars and catching fish, and great memories here at Fish Famous Johns Pass.
We had that big hurricane came down the Keys, crossed the Keys, wrecked the train. All the people that was working killed thousands of people. Then that storm came up the Gulf. Yeah. Came up the Gulf, When it hit Tampa Bay, it turned right on in and came right on in Tampa Bay and did a lot of damage, especially on the other side. Because where was water going to go? Before it really got into us, they expected a 60-foot wall of water.
60 feet.
Yes, but the wind changed. Consequently, the water went down. We walked across from Gulfport to Pass Grill up to the deep channel as far as we could go. Because all the water,
Across the bay that wasn't there.
yeah, all the water was gone.
Wow.
And then when we got back home, it was coming in behind us.
It was chasing you.
Yeah. And let's see, the pier was underwater there at Gulfport. The water went up the road where the trolley tracks are. It went up there pretty to the grocery store. Then Snell Island was underwater. All that section in Tampa on the south side, I don't know, what do they call that place there now?
Harbor Island or something like that?
No, it's a big resort where people live in it.
Davis Island?
Oh, no. This is right on us, on the east side.
Rocky Point?
I wish I could know. A lot of people live there.
Over there somewhere in Tampa.
Yeah, somewhere in Tampa.
I bet I just passed the road, got whacked too, huh?
Oh, yeah, they got whacked good.
Well, when you're talking about significant happenings, a few things come to mind. I remember as a boy, the Kingfisher party boat was offshore fishing on a half-day trip, and for some unknown reason, they hooked up with a giant whale shark.
Oh, yes, I remember
that?
Yes, yeah, I do.
And the whale shark towed the Kingfisher for miles until they decided we better cut the line because we're never going to land this thing. I think the thing is about 50 feet long and weighed several tons. And I believe Snatch was the captain.
Yes,
Captain
he was.
Snatch, Orlando
Yes, he
Oakley.
was.
Then another story is there's a picture of my dad, and he's holding a wahoo in his hand. It was 55 or 65 pounds, and he caught it back here in the hurricane hole behind the second location of Johns Pass Fish Company. The original location was the base of the bridge on the Treasure Island side, and then we moved across the street in 1963, and he had to tear those trailers out. We had the Johns Pass Trailer Park. Now, who had a trailer park on an inlet on the coast of Florida? Not many people, but those trailers go back a long time with my dad, my mom, and all the fishermen would live in it. The fishermen would come in, catch their fish, go across the street to the Kingfish, drink up their catch. They'd go to Charlie, my dad, and borrow money in the cigar box, and he'd loan them money because he knew they were bringing fish in. So it was just a cycle of them catching fish, drinking it up, going out, borrowing money, bringing it back in, pay my dad back, catch more fish, go to the bar and drink and keep on going. And that's helped supply the Johns Pass Fish Company with millions of pounds of seafood over 35 some odd years.
You had the Kingfish special breakfast too, because none of them starved.
Oh yeah, we had Esther.
Oh, yeah.
Esther, red-haired lady, and Laurel, and so I can't think of her name. We'd serve a good breakfast, a good hamburger, right there at the
man.
counter. I remember one time they broke in. My dad had the safe in front of the front window. So when you came into the counter, there is the safe right there. And he said, "Why'd you put it there?" He goes, "Well, everybody can see it. And if somebody's going to try to rob you, maybe somebody will see you from the street." Well, they did rob us. They came in and they hauled the safe out and they took it over to the power plant that they just tore down. It has the 3 stacks on it. It blew up about 6 months ago, and that's where they found it. They never did get on the inside of it. Well, the next safe he bought, you couldn't move it. Must have weighed 5,000 or 10,000 pounds. He goes, "Those guys are going to try to move this one. They can just have all the money." Then one time my dad got in his caddy and he had the day's receipts, and he had an Eldorado Cadillac, had all the windows open, the money was sitting right next to him, and this guy comes in, reaches in, grabs the money, runs across the street, gets in the car. Jack Hellinger, the Hellinger family, saw him. He was selling my dad postcards and matchbooks, saw him and chased the guy, and they finally caught him up there in North Clearwater. He was running in the bushes. So that was another thing that happened, you know. We had several fires here. We had the Miss Brooklyn burn up right here where the Miss Judy used to operate here on the Johns Pass Marina side. And we had several fires in the trailer park. You know, People died. I remember I'm just a kid and a body floated through Johns Pass and wound up here at the fuel dock behind us, and that was the first person I ever saw that was not alive, and of course that was frightening to me. And then, you know, one time, I don't know if you knew this, Shorty, but we were fishing an aluminum boat in Indian Rocks Beach for sea bass and grunts at the rock pile just outside the sandbar. We had a tarpon jump in the boat.
Yeah, I remember that.
He was 68 pounds. We brought him here. We weighed him in at Bill's Bait House, and we got into St. Pete Times. You remember that?
Oh, yeah, it kind of tore the boat up.
It tore the boat up. Yeah, it was an aluminum boat. Yeah, tore. We had the oars out, just beating the oars in, and this and that. And I know also, you know, here there's several pictures here in this marina that we're doing this video in, where we had a 700-pound stingray weighed in, 700-pound sharks. You cut the belly open and all the shark little babies get out and swim, you know, they'd swim away or whatever, but a lot of big sharks on the outgoing tide. They'd set balloons up. And I remember also, my dad fought DOT. He wanted him to keep the old Johns Pass Bridge as a fishing pier. Take out the center span and keep that. You remember that? Keep that, and don't spend $300,000 on the catwalks on the new bridge, because those catwalks are high, and how are you going to hoist the fish up and this and that? And that's a waste of government money, but anyhow, they tore it down. And that rack pile's still there, and there's big jewfish on it still underneath well, they'd catch a jewfish and they'd take it over to Johns Pass Aquarium, and with Patty the porpoise. You remember that?
Yeah.
You know, and then we had Smolens. Was it not Smolens, but Harold's Knife and Gun Club?
Yeah.
That was Madeira Beach. You know, Madeira Beach was Mad Beach. Treasure Island, we were a little
Well, we
smarter.
caught that big shark out there fishing for marlin.
Yeah, a 710-pound
We brought it
bull
in.
shark.
Yeah, we brought it in, and it ended up on the Madeira Beach mayor's front porch.
710-pound bull?
Yeah, Shorty and I, we were
That's a lot of bull.
we were marlin fishing, and I said we'd caught a bonita, and I said, well, Shorty, I'm just a young kid. I said, Shorty, throw a line out. We caught this shark. Let's tow it in. And back then we had the Johns Pass Seafood Festival, and it was on both sides of Johns Pass and Treasure Island. And they had to guess the weight of the shark, guess the weight of the shark, right? So we stuck him in the freezer for 6 months. We would have to step over him in the freezer at the Kingfish, hauled him down there, hung him up, and he wound up, the tradition was that we're going to tow it somewhere. And I still, to this day, I have no idea who towed that shark, but somebody put it in the mayor's yard in Madeira Beach, okay? Well, then after about a day, it started stinking. Someone decided, well, let's tow it and put it in the mayor of Treasure Island. So somebody, I don't have no idea who that is, towed it to Walter Stubbs's yard. And of course, by that time, it was stinking pretty good. And I believe they had to get the front end loader from the city of Treasure Island sanitation department to haul that shark away. But that was the story of the shark.
Yep.
And you caught it. I caught it. You put us on the spot.
I don't know nothing about it.
But then another story was Donald Cape, who was my dad's partner. Many people don't realize we had a tsunami here. There was an earthquake in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico in the early 50s. And we had a rising tide of about 4.5, 5 feet. Didn't make a lot of news, but it was an earthquake if you look up the history books, you'll see where there was an earthquake in the Gulf of Mexico, and we had the wave come in Johns Pass. I don't know if you remember that, but Donald Cate always talked about that. Because Donald Cate was my dad's partner in Johns Pass Fish Company. He grew up here in St. Petersburg, and a lot of people, I'm a local. You're a local? I said, I tell you what. I said, where were you born? They say something. I said, well, I was born. They asked me, where were you born? I was born in Mountain Park. And they said, where's that? I said, you ain't been here long enough. And Mountain Park is the Bayfront Center, and Mountain Park was built in 1925 or 6, and it was built on an Indian mountain.
That's where I was born.
That's where I was born.
Mountain Park.
There's smart people are born at Mountain Park,
Oh,
right?
yes.
Well, I'll tell you, we've had a lot of history here, and our family and Shorty's family and his boys, and we had Ralph Marcotte, Johnny Marcotte, Charlie Clymer, Buddy Maris, Buddy Beggs. They've all passed on, unfortunately, but they were the fathers of our fishing industry and charter boat industry here out of Johns Pass, don't you think?
Yep. In '48 we had that big red tide.
Oh yeah. Well, I wasn't born then. But big red tide. It was a big one.
Big red tide.
How big was it?
How big was it?
The barnacles fell off the pilings.
That's a pretty big red
That's how
tide.
bad it was. The water coming through Johns Pass was red,
Wow.
and they used his copper sulfate, and it killed it.
I remember with Isle Capri, they had biplanes landing and loading up copper sulfate and bombing red tide, but I don't know, I think I was probably maybe 9 or 10 years old.
Yeah.
Well, I was
I
responsible, yeah,
remember
yeah.
that, and the bays were white with fish.
Well, they don't want to use it now. Oh, it damages the environment, stuff like that. They're full of prunes.
It worked, but
It worked then. It can work again.
it's not environmentally correct for them now.
Been a lot of fish caught out of here since then.
Yep, yep,
Well,
yep.
Shorty, you remember in the original Kingfish, which is now Charlie's Dock,
Yeah.
in the main bar, we had a footrest, okay, and it had running salt water in it. And so, and my dad, you know, it was basically a spittoon. And because the restaurant was built all over the water.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, you know, we had a regular come in there, he'd drink beer all day long. And nobody could figure out why he never went to the restroom. He didn't have to.
Pee in the trough.
He'd just pee right in the trough. Well, we eventually had to stop that because of the environmental issues, stuff, you can't do that. But I remember when we cleaned the Kingfish kitchen, it was all over the water, we would shovel all the stuff that fell on the floor, the shrimp and the piece of the french fries and this and that, into the hole and down the hole. And you look down in the hole and there's all these catfish and angelfish and mullet.
Yeah.
Me and CC and our buddies, we'd get the snatch hook out and we'd snatch mullet. And we'd come out behind the counter, we got fresh fish behind the counter, you know, at the Kingfish, you know?
Yeah.
You remember that?
They weren't the low cholesterol kind.
No. You could still go underneath Charlie's dock right now and still find china and silverware intact underneath that dock.
Yeah.
So yeah, you know, a lot of history. I mean, we had a barber shop there. We had the sundry, Kingfish sundries. We'd get a soda
Yeah.
pop and a banana split. My dad always, he said, I had to pay for my haircut. He goes, I'll pay for your haircut and give you $5. Oh, great. I thought that was a great deal. Well, he didn't tell me that he told the barber to cut all my hair off. Because I had you know, back then, the hippie days in the 60s, early 60s, mid 70s, I had long hair and a beard and all that stuff. He wanted to get rid of that hair. You look like a hippie. You know. Charlie, I remember one day that he told the story that the guy got out of hand in the Kingfish, and he chased him out the back door, out onto the dock, and he had a pistol in his hand. He never hit him with a pistol, but he kicked him. Put a big bruise on his rear end, about yay big, and kicked him right into the water. You didn't mess with Charlie Rice. He was kind of like the law down here back in the 40s or whatever. You know, they respected him, and he was giving a lot of people a lot of jobs. And then my mom, Agnes, you know, she was a pistol. She was the matriarch of Johns Pass, and she did an awful lot of great things. Sponsored fireworks one year. Always was a firm believer in taking care of the people that didn't have any food to eat. She'd feed them, take them off the street. You know, she'd sit there, sell those trinkets at Gators, you know. I remember one time they come in there, and this guy a good friend of mine came in there one day and saw this lady selling the trinkets, came to the bar, and he goes, "Sit. You ought to be ashamed of yourself." I said, "Well, what's the matter?" He goes, "You got that bag lady out front selling all those trinkets. You should be ashamed." I said, "Bag lady, that's the boss. She owns all the property here." So I tell you, you know, a lot of people don't realize that Congressman Bill Young, my dad and my mom and our family and associates helped put him in office
Yep.
20, 35 years ago, whatever.
I see.
Yeah, exactly.
Kramer, Ingram, and Young.
And Young, yeah, Bill Kramer, right. Well, you
Yeah.
probably took him fishing, didn't you, one time or another?
Yeah.
Well, you know,
I know all three of them.
back in the late 50s, early 60s, I'm 10, 11, 12 years old. My dad called me to come into the boat room at the Kingfish. I want you to meet some boys. So I go in there, and who's in there but Casey Stengel, Red Sheehandeast, Mickey Mantle, Roger Maris, and Whitey Herzog.
Yeah.
Every one of those guys became Hall of Famers. At that time, I didn't know anything. They signed an autograph on a Kingfish placemat, and we're still looking for that placemat. But I do have Mickey Mantle's autograph. And I remember the Madeira Beach police or TI police, they'd be chasing somebody from Madeira Beach, and they wouldn't make that curve at the old Johns Pass Bridge. They'd hit the side curve, whatever, and it was Mickey.
Worked his way back.
But they didn't put him in the jail. And you know, we've had all kind. We've had Jack Buck eat at the Kingfish restaurant, Stan Musial. We had Jonathan Winters. A lot of people. When you're in the fish business or restaurant business for 60 years in one location, you're bound to have a few people show up in your restaurant.
I've taken a lot of those boys fishing.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, our most popular platter was the seafood platter.
That was the most.
We sell
best
more
platter
seafood
on the
platters,
West Coast.
shrimp, scallops, and sea bass, and that's what I named my boat after, the seafood platter, and I was fortunate enough to have a dinghy on that, and I called it the tartar sauce. So, you know, now I got a boat called the Marlin Hunter, because I got a boy named Marlin. So, but I love to fish, and in this room here where we're at, I've caught every one of these fish. I'm sure Shorty has caught every one of these species that are hanging on the wall. They're all types. There's the Gulf of Mexico is one of the richest gulfs and richest ocean fishing water body in the world. Most people don't realize that. It's because it's basically a giant lake.
Yeah, I've got a 185-pound tarpon hanging on the wall.
That's a
A
big
lot of
tarpon.
That's a lot of tarpon.
Big tarpon. They'd catch tarpon off the old Johns Pass Bridge.
Yeah.
In fact, we got pictures in here of tarpon hanging when they caught them. But Shorty, you had a little story about you know, when the first bridge went in 1928, it was set back off the coastline. And I know when they decided to put the new bridge at the new location, my dad said that's a bad idea because you're going to be fronting those northwesters in wintertime, and you're going to expose that bridge to a lot of weather. Why don't you build the bridge right next to the existing ones? Well, DOT and everybody else was smarter than everybody, and they decided to place the bridge where it is now. I believe they built that in 1972. Sometime thereafter, what did your son do? He wound up doing something underneath that bridge?
He went down with his diving gear, because I told him I was suspicious. And sure enough, all the sand had washed away from underneath the pilings. And I told him, I said, if a couple of trucks, heavy trucks, hit that bridge at the same time, I said it would go down.
Now, I know he's right, because I personally, with Captain Huffy, we were out there salvaging a boat, and we went over there and looked underneath the bridge to see if we could shoot something, which we weren't there, but you can't shoot spearfish fish around a bridge. And I remember seeing those pilings that you're talking about exposed and dangling, and I could stand up and the piling would still be above me.
Yeah.
You come to find out that 18 to 22% of the pilings were dangling. So they came in and they cut holes in the bridge and drove new pilings in, correct, to stabilize it.
Yeah.
But what happened is, because of the erosion, it's 65 feet underneath Johns Pass Bridge. When you go underneath that bridge, we got my fathometer on, it drops right to 65 feet. And that scouring, constant, okay? And what happened by them placing the bridge where they placed it, it changed the flow of Johns Pass to where all the sand that was on our side wound up over there at the Hubbard side. And that's when my dad kind of said he had to stabilize his land, so he started putting fill in.
Yeah.
And that's where Gator sits to this day, is on that fill. We had to put pilings in to keep our property from washing into the ocean.
You remember I told you one time that if you didn't do something about those pilings, I said, you're going to lose Gator?
Yeah, exactly. In fact, the reason that the Kingfish restaurant, its demise was because when they were building the new bridge, my dad allowed the tugboats to dock at our dock. And the tugboat came in one day and he lost reverse and he couldn't stop. And he hit the side of that dock right at the Kingfish restaurant where the fish company was, and shook everything and kind of destabilized everything, and we had to tear that dock down, the restaurant down, move across the street. And that was 1972 that we moved across the street, you know. But that's another historic thing that happened and why they put the bridge there. And you remember Sadie Lou? She'd bite off the head of the shrimp raw.
John's Pass Stadium?
It's Johns Pass Sadie.
Johns Pass Sadie.
Yeah, exactly. Johns Pass Sadie. And then my brother and I, we'd get out there on the outgoing tide in front of the Kingfish, because the original Kingfish was all over the water, overlooking Johns
Right.
Pass. Outgoing tide, we'd throw our line out with a big lead and a hook on it and a big chunk of meat, and we'd catch sail cats, big sail cats. I mean, 5, 6, 7, 8 pounds. A lot of people don't realize that there's two types of catfish besides our mud cat, and one of them is a sail cat. Very good eating too. Is that right?
Yep. Sail cat's good eating.
Yeah, good eating, good eating.
Hey, talk a little bit about John's Pass Sadie. That name comes up a little. Where'd she come from? Does anybody know? Nobody seems to know.
No, John's Pass Sadie, I barely remembered it, but I remember being in the bait shop with Bill Stevens, and they talk about John's Pass Sadie, and I remember her coming in one time. She was pretty old then. I was just a kid. And there's John's Pass Sadie. I said, well, what does she do? Well, she bites off the heads of the shrimp. And that's really all I remember, but everybody talks about her.
Yeah.
You know, we have, you know, a lot of old codgers that hung around the dock and fished here for many years. They'd come in and they'd, because my dad would allow them to fish on our docks. Over time, we had to stop that and restrict that because of liability, insurance, and all the lawsuits and stuff, this and that. But back in the good old days, you really kind of could catch any fish you wanted right here at John's Pass.
Yep.
In fact, our last tournament here, which was our spring tournament, the day before the tournament, I was setting up the weigh-in slip. They called me and said, Sid, this kid wants to weigh in a kingfish. Okay, so I go over there. I got the scale set up, ready to go for the weigh-in for the next day. It's about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and sure enough, he's got a kingfish. 37.5 pounds. You know where he caught that kingfish, Shorty?
No,
On
I
the
didn't.
inside of the bridge, right in front of Gators.
Right in front.
Right in front of Gators. I saw a guy 2 days before that bring a 40-pounder in. I went to Jack Holmes Southern Kingfish Association, who sanctions our tournament for the last 23 years. I said, now, Jack, do you know of any weigh-in anywhere in the United States of America that you can catch a kingfish at the weigh-in slip? He goes, nope, only at John's Pass and Treasure Island.
There, I saw it.
And I think, yeah, Bob, you saw that or whatever, and I sent that into the news, and we had it on Facebook and everything else. But, you know, you can, in fact, my son Marlon, 3 days prior to that, was down on the floating dock, and a rocket. Now, a rocket kingfish is a fish that he looks up and he sees the bait up on the surface, and he'll rocket out trying to go after that bait. And he rocketed right in front of Marlon, almost hit him in the head. And God, Dad, look at that kingfish almost hit me. I said, you're kidding. No, he's right, you know. So Captain Shorty is holding a picture here, a very interesting picture. This picture was taken in 1952, and the little boy is my brother, C.C. Rice Jr., and the gentleman is my dad, Charlie Rice. And they're standing on the bow of the boat called the John's Pass. Now, the John's Pass was built in Tarpon Springs by Old Man Saris, the Saris Boatyard, located right next to Louis Pappas's restaurant. This particular vessel was the first vessel that had a shrimp brine freezing system where they took salt and ice to brine freeze. The reason my dad was a pioneer of the fishing industry here at Fish Famous John's Pass, and he had a captain by the name of Captain Baby Ruth. And Captain Ruth says, you know, when I go to Campeche fishing grounds to catch shrimp, I'm out there for 21, 28 days. I got to come back in at 14, 15 days because when you put shrimp on ice and stuff over a period of time, they turn black on you. And he goes, I need to figure out how to freeze them. So they developed this brine. This is the very first freezer boat, and it was launched right out of here in Tarpon Springs and fished right out of here at John's Pass. This particular boat discovered shrimp in Honduras, and our family had a long history in the Spanish Honduras and discovered shrimp and lobster there. And unfortunately, the boat sank in Honduras, hit a sandbar when they had the autopilot on and the captain went to sleep. But oops. But that was, you know, the very, 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 very first shrimp boat that had that. Another people don't realize is that my dad, along with Captain Ruth of this vessel and a gentleman by the name of Mr. Busby, they designed what we call the Bandit electric fishing reel to this day. All the commercial boats here have an electric motor with a big arm on it, with a big wheel on it with cable, and they drop it down at 100, 200, 300 feet with a big weight on it and a bunch of hooks on it, and that's a grouper rig, and it's called a Bandit fisherman.
Bandit fisherman.
And my dad, but he never got it patented. He should have, but he said, the heck with it, you know. But he was a pioneer of the industry, and another interesting story about Fish Famous John's Pass. Shorty, another story that comes to mind is, again, I'm just a young chicken compared to you. We had the no-name storm.
I lived on the beach, huh?
I think it was in March, and I believe you were running my 42 Hatteras, and I was at Gators. I was watching the storm on the TV, and we had Miss Belmar was there, and we had the cruise ship there. And I ran back to my house on the beach and ran through the storm there, but that storm came up out of nowhere. And since you're a weatherman, you had a couple of fronts meeting each other, and that's when they flooded all up in Crystal River. They had 12-foot tides. Here, we watched Johns Pass rise almost 8 feet in a matter of 20 minutes.
Yep.
And I remember the captain on the Miss Belmar had his boat full forward, and the cruise ship was full forward, and they're both pointing to the west. And they barely, tied to the dock, and they barely maintained staying at that dock with that storm passing through.
Wow.
And because if they had not been going full forward, they'd have tore all of the Gators dock right out, and all of Charlie's dock. Do you remember a storm back in, I think, Hurricane Donna?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Had strong northerly winds.
Northerly winds, that's
Yep.
right, Hurricane Donna.
Yep.
Then in the freeze, and I think the freeze in '62 killed all the Australian pine trees
Yep.
up and down the beach, killed them all. And if you look at the north end of Treasure Island, what we call the Rock House, you'll see those Australian pine trees very high. That's how old they are, from 1962 to this date. They replanted themselves and grew back.
Yep.
Hopefully we don't have a storm blow through again this year.
Well, I was living at Sunset Beach at the time, and it got pretty high on the water.
Well, Sunset Beach always gets the water. To this day, where the Kingfish was located across the street from the original Kingfish at Charlie's Dock now, located across the street, which was Dick and Millie's, where Peaches, the bartender, everybody remembers Peaches one way or the
Oh,
other.
yeah.
He was quite a character. He tried to commit suicide one time, and I think Sergeant Roy Anderson came down there and told him, get off that bridge and get back to work. And he didn't commit suicide. He went back to work.
Yeah.
So I remember at the Harold's Knife and Gun Club, Madeira Beach, they threw the cigarette machine in Johns Pass, and our guys on this side went over and dug it out and got all the quarters out of it. So, so, you know, we never really had a battle between Treasure Island and Madeira Beach, but, you know, you had the Mad Beach and the Group of Republic, we had the Kingfish and Treasure Island over here, and, you know, kind of like two different worlds, the Rices and the Hubbards. The Hubbards came into Johns Pass, I think, in the 70s, early 70s.
Yeah, they came from Paso Grill.
From Paso Grill, that's right. Old Wilson Hubbard was running a headboat out of there.
Yep.
And, you know, did a very good job. But a lot of people thought, well, the Hubbards are the ones that were at Johns Pass. No, it was the Rices.
Saw a brochure, and it was $5 all day and $2.50 or $3 half a day.
Yep, oh yeah. Unfortunately, my mom passed away in November of 2012, and she was 93 years old. But if she put up with Charlie Rice, she was a tough old bird, right, Shorty?
She sure was.
So when she turned 75, Big Daddy Don Garlitz, the drag racer, was running for office. And I orchestrated a 75th birthday party for her, thinking, well, 75, that's pretty old, not many years left. We had the marching band from Busch Gardens come down Kingfish Drive, and we had Big Daddy Don Garlitz come in on a sidecar with Mom on the sidecar, riding in on that motorcycle, on that Harley. And she had a grand old time, and you know, I told that story, I told her at her wake the story, well, I was 75, and you know, 22 years later, she was still kicking. But she would sit around and take care of those people that were in need, you know. Well, the one thing my dad always told all us kids, he goes, you know, I made one mistake with your mother. I said, what's that, Pop? He says, I taught her how to run the cash register.
That's true.
My dad was 21 years older than my mom, and we had 6 kids in our family. And I think Shorty, he had a nickname for you. What did Charlie Rice nickname you?
The baby maker,
And why was that?
because all I had was boys.
And how many did you have?
7.
7 boys. So big families back then, and with my dad being 21 years older, when he was in his 80s, my mom was just getting going. So when they put the new bridge in here at Johns Pass, they kind of cut us off from the boulevard, because the road was Gulf Boulevard right in front of the Kingfish, which they renamed it Kingfish Drive. Walter Stubbs made a proclamation, and it became Kingfish Drive. So my dad would get in his car, and he wouldn't be driving, my mom would be driving, and he'd smoke a big cigar, always had a stogie. They're driving out one day, and he goes, you know, Aggie, he goes, one of these days I'm going to buy you that motel right there on the corner. They're called the Green Lantern.
Yep.
And well, finally my mom says one day, he said, I'm gonna buy you that motel. Well, Charlie, don't worry about it. I already own it. We already own it. She had already purchased it. Goes back to that running that cash register. So then Charlie goes, we're gonna go over to the Rock House. It's called the Stone House or Rock House. It's on the west side of the bridge, right here on the point. And we're gonna have a barbecue over there. And she said, well, my dad said, what'd you do, buy that too? Yep, I bought that one too. So they go out and have the barbecue, and they're sitting out there, and Charlie's got a cigar, and the family's all there, and says, you know, Aggie, he goes, you know, because my dad was a firm believer, if you buy the adjoining property and the adjoining property to that, your property becomes more valuable. And there was 55 purchases by our family at the northern end of Treasure Island, became almost 8 acres of land. So he's sitting there and looking at the vacant lot at the base of the bridge. The Flathman family and the Cutler family, Carl Cutler from St. Pete JC, they own that land. You know, Aggie, he's done that cigar, he goes, you ought to buy that lot right there because and take that fence down and make this rock house more valuable. Charlie, don't worry about it. I already own that too. So in reality, my mom is the one that really put the pieces to the puzzle together. And I made a game up one year, I called it Riceopoly. And I changed all the names on the Monopoly game and gave it to every one of the kids. And we, you know, where the train was in the Monopoly game, I made that John's Bass Fish Company. The electric company was Florida Power. You know, Marvin Gardens was one of the hotels, and the Kingfish Motel and all that. And it was rather interesting. But you know, it's just we were fortunate enough to grow up in an era that people was able to buy things and do things, and we employed a lot of people. I can't tell you how many people that I employed running the restaurants, and my dad did the same thing, and my brother and all of our family. So we're just glad to be here at John's Pass, glad to be here in Treasure Island. And I remember this. There's a story. I built gators, and gators I put 4 alligator heads on the roof of the westernmost building where the elevator tower is. And the city manager at that time, I'm trying to think of his name, Peter Lombardi was our city manager. Called me up and sent the code enforcement down there and says, that's an illegal sign. That's a roof on a sign on a roof. You can't do that. I said, what? No, you can't put signage or figures or whatever on a roof because it's against the sign ordinance. I said, well, all right. I called him up 2 days later, and I said, Mr. Lombardi, I says, as soon as you tell the Golden Phoenix to take that pagoda down, I'll take my alligators down. Because there's no difference between that Chinese pagoda and all those dragons on his roof than my alligators on our roof. So, back then we were notorious. Even one time, I believe there was a guy by the name of Bob Dowling. We had issues on the bridge. We took a picture and this and that, and about noise or what it is. But now here we are today, 25 some odd years later, good friends and laughing about all the history and what we did here at John's Pass. Because my dad was kind of notorious. He said he'd do things and ask questions later.
I think my dad was the same way.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Yeah. My dad, Charlie Rice, obviously had that stogie and he had the old Kingfish hat, and behind him is John's Pass Marina. He's sitting on the corner of the front of the second location of the Kingfish restaurant, and we put a bench out front. He had a cane, and cigar, and that particular time he's about 84 years old there. He came in one day, came into the bar, I'm running the restaurant, and he put his hand out and he had 2 quarters in his hand. He goes, look here, Little Mac. He called me Little Mac. Look here, Little Mac. I got 50 cents. I said, where'd you get that, Dad? He goes, well, I was out there parking cars. He goes, but I made sure that the car that I parked had 5 people in it, not just 2. That way we get more sales in the restaurant. And here it is. We go full circle. I grew up parking cars, and here's my dad at 84 years old parking cars for me, and I'm in there running a restaurant for him. That was Charlie Rice. This picture here, the very big one at the top, is what John's Pass used to look like in the early 50s. We're looking due west. We're on the east side of the original John's Pass Bridge. On the right-hand side is Madeira Beach. On the left-hand side is a series of buildings. The very first little building is Bill's Bait House. The yellow roof building was John's Pass Fish Company. The next two buildings was the Kingfish Restaurant over Charlie's Dock. And the last, very last building, it's a little bit brown towards the pine trees in the very back, that is the east end of Gators, known as the Saloon in today. The two pictures on the bottom are of shrimp boats, because my dad, again, discovered shrimp in Honduras, and we shrimped out of here in Campeche and produced and packed the fresh shrimp. These three pictures were located in what we called the boat room in the Kingfish Restaurant in the early 50s and early 60s. Well, here we are with some history of the Kingfish Restaurant. And right here is a 1965 menu. And you can see right here it says fresh grouper, $2.20. How about that? We had a half a Florida lobster with shrimp, scallops, and sea bass for $3.75. Cocktails, a Manhattan was 70 cents. Kahlua was 50 cents. Home baked pies was 35 cents. 1965. This particular placemat right here was the original placemat at the Kingfish Restaurant. King mackerel, food fish, royalty of the 7 seas. Around the perimeter we had the fish with the numbers, and they identified them with the here. And if this particular placemat looks familiar, if you've ever eaten at Ted Peters' Spoke Fish House, that's the same company, Great Outdoors Press, that did our placemat along with Ted Peters, and they still have the same format to this day. This here was our second version of our placemat at the Kingfish. This was in the 70s, mid-70s. I recreated the same thing with the Kingfish logo and put all the different fish in here and identified it. Kids would love to do it. One kid turned the placemat around, wrote me a note, and drew a grouper with eyeglasses on it. Reminds me of Nemo, the movie. That was done in 1978. In 1972, when we closed the Kingfish Restaurant, we moved across the street temporarily, called it the Kingfish Annex, and we had a very small menu. That's what this menu here at the very bottom is, if you can see it, and the other menu over here, where we had just 60 seats while we were remodeling the rest of the dining room. And this is the 1989 menu, when we remodeled the restaurant again, and you can see that the prices went up a little bit, but back then in 1989, fresh grouper was only $5.45. And we had stuffed flounder at $5. Actually, stuffed flounder was more expensive than grouper. It was $5.95. We had also from the steamer, and we had seafood platters. I believe we had lobster. We had a snow crab, was $4.20. Steam platter, clams and mussels, $9. Captain Special. We were well known for our clam chowder, and we were very, very favorably priced for the family. It was a very family-oriented restaurant. You could bring your whole family in there one day and feed a party of 5 for $25. But that's the history of Fish Famous John's Pass, the Kingfish Restaurant, the El Capitan, the Kingfisher, and the Rice family, and goes back a long ways. And a lot of people forget about what it used to look like, what it is. But this historical review that's being done by the City of Treasure Island and the Historical Society is something that's great, so that we can pass on to our children on how it used to be.
We hope you enjoyed the history and the tales of Treasure Island. There's more to come. We have over 57 hours of the tales of Treasure Island. So as soon as we can get them to you, we will. Thanks for watching Tales of Treasure Island.
Hi there, we need your support to support the Treasure Island Historic Society.
and we'll bring you more tales of Treasure Island. Those people are great. They send us pictures and memorabilia and tell us about things that happen on the island, and we're able to go out and find the people that can tell you the real stories of the tales of Treasure Island. So support the Treasure Island Historic Society, and we'll bring you more tales of Treasure Island. Thanks again.